Good evening, you're watching BBC Newsline. The headlines this Tuesday evening.
I'm in Westminster, where Unionist MPs have taken Boris Johnson to task over his Brexit deal ahead of a crucial vote in the Commons.
This change in this agreement is the most fundamental change to our union since the Act of Union. That merits debate, that merits discussion, and this House needs to listen to that.
I say very clearly to the Prime Minister, do not take the people of Northern Ireland for fools. We are not fools.
There's a warning that the Brexit deal could pose a threat to the local economy. With abortion in Northern Ireland no longer a criminal offence, is the healthcare system ready for the change? A woman who lived with her partner's corpse for over a week is jailed for a year. After a vicious attack on this senior Quinn employee, the firm's boss says someone is paying criminals to target staff.
To whoever's paying them, I would say this is a crazy system to be on, and it just defies any kind of logic.
In the League of Ireland, Derry City seek to secure European football next season, and in the Irish League, Linfield look to cut the gap at the top of the table.
And our little spell of dry weather is coming to an end. There is rain in the forecast for tomorrow, working in from the west through the day.
In the next half hour, MPs will begin voting on the government's Brexit bill. If that passes, the Commons will then vote on the timetable, which the Prime Minister has set to fast-track the withdrawal agreement through Parliament. The DUP is likely to vote against the deal, as it opposes its special arrangements for Northern Ireland. Our political reporter Jane McCormack is in Westminster this evening. Jane.
Donna, the government tonight is posing MPs with two options: deal or a delay, and then possibly an election. Yet again, Northern Ireland is at the centre of all of this drama. And hours before the vote, Unionist MPs angrily clashed with Boris Johnson over his Brexit deal. My colleague Gareth Gordon was watching the debate.
Northern Ireland and its place in the UK. Where does it stand now after this? The withdrawal agreement bill. It will take the UK out of the European Union, but what will it do to Northern Ireland? Questions, questions.
What more can he do to reassure the people of Northern Ireland who are feeling that they are being cut off, and particularly when they could have accepted perhaps some regulations between trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, because that happens at the moment, but have been absolutely astonished to find that trading between Northern Ireland and Great Britain is somehow now treated as if they are sending it to a foreign country. That is not acceptable.
It's quite clear that whatever he says about Northern Ireland being in the UK Customs Union, de facto the European Union Customs Code applies in Northern Ireland if the protocol comes into place, which requires exit declarations from Northern Ireland to Great Britain. Yes, it does. The Brexit Secretary said opposite yesterday and had to be corrected by HMRC.
Do not take the people of Northern Ireland for fools. We are not fools. The Prime Minister needs to explain in detail how his new consent process operates in detail.
Faced with such an onslaught, the Prime Minister tried to turn back the tide.
There will be no checks between NI and GB, and nor would she expect there to be any, and that is made. It is made absolutely clear that there are no checks, GB NI. There will be some light touch measures to ensure there's no illegal trade. Mr. Speaker, the House will know full well that these are transitory arrangements, and if the people of Northern Ireland choose to dissent from them, they melt away unless by a majority they choose to retain them. And there will be no checks, as I repeat, there will be no checks.
He was met with scepticism, to say the least.
Why then does the impact assessment produced by his own government, slipped out late last night, make quite explicit at point 241 that goods moving from GB to NI will be required to fill in import declarations and entry summary declarations, which will result in additional costs as a result of Northern Ireland. How does the Prime Minister square that fact with the bluster and rhetoric that he is serving out here today.
This change in this agreement is the most fundamental change to our union since the Act of Union. That merits debate, that merits discussion, and this House needs to listen to that.
Unionist fears alone may not see the bill voted down tonight, but its passage could be slowed. And what will the government do then? Gareth Gordon, BBC Newsline.
Jane, we're expecting that vote in the Commons behind you shortly. Take us through what happens next.
Yeah, well, Donna, there are several ways this could go, really. We think the government will just about win the first vote on the bill in principle, but it's the vote after that which could bring all of this to a halt. That's the vote on the 3-day proposed legislative timetable to try and get this very important detail through Parliament. MPs here are not happy tonight, some of them saying they feel there simply hasn't been enough time to scrutinise it. Among them, the DUP's Chief Whip, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, who strongly hinted to me a short time ago that the DUP would vote against the government on both fronts.
Well, we're very concerned about the very short period the government is allowing for proper debate and scrutiny on this bill. Effectively only 2 more days for what is probably one of the most important pieces of legislation, certainly in my time as a Member of Parliament, in over 20 years. So we want more time to properly scrutinise this bill.
On a separate matter, Jane, you have news on payments for victims of the Troubles. What's the latest?
Yes, Donna, as of midnight last night, the government now has a duty to set up a pension scheme for victims of the Troubles. Tonight, the Northern Ireland office has published a consultation document on that. It says it expects the legislation to be introduced to Parliament by January next year, with the first payments likely being made by May next year. It's also confirmed that anybody injured by their own hand won't be eligible for a payment. And it also gives us some sense of what the payment scheme itself will be like, with about £9,800 for those who were most severely injured during the Troubles, down to around £1,900 for those with a less severe disability. And Donna, we're being told by the government there will be a 6-week period for people to get in touch and tell the government what they think about the proposed scheme.
OK, Jane McCormack in Westminster, thank you. A risk assessment by the government has warned that the New Deal Brexit could mean a reduction in business investment, consumer spending and trade here. The negative outcomes could come from divergence with the rest of the United Kingdom and increased uncertainty. With the details, our economics and business editor John Campbell.
What happens to trade across the Irish Sea will define if the Brexit deal can work for the Northern Ireland economy. Make no mistake, there would be significant change. Products coming in from Great Britain will be subject to customs declarations, and in some cases tariffs will have to be paid. Livestock coming in here from the rest of the UK is already subject to checks. This would have to be expanded to cover all meat and dairy products. The government assessment is clear that all this new red tape brings economic risks. It said those could include reduced trade, lower consumer spending and reduced profitability for businesses trading to and from Northern Ireland. When the Prime Minister reached a deal with the EU, the precise details of how the new Irish Sea border would operate were left open. On the current timetable, there's just 14 months to sort it all out.
From our perspective, 14 months is nowhere near enough. We need a considerably longer time, and the opportunity and the option for the UK to extend this transition period should really be taken up.
At Westminster yesterday, it was confirmed, after a bit of confusion, that the new deal will also mean goods moving from here to Great Britain will need new paperwork.
Could I also, just come back to Lord Wood, because he asked a very fair question on declarations. Just to be clear, the exit summary declarations will be required in terms of Northern Ireland to GB.
So companies like this car parts firm will face new administration on components coming in from Great Britain and on finished parts going out. The politician who got that admission from the Brexit Secretary says that what's being planned needs a lot more scrutiny.
What it will feel like, how onerous the paperwork will be, the costs, all these things that are unclear. But in a way, that's the most extraordinary thing of all, that If this place behind me is trying to rush through legislation to seal the deal, the consequences for ordinary companies in Northern Ireland are very, very unclear.
And what about consumers buying goods online and having them sent through the post from Great Britain? One of the UK's top tax officials thinks there should be no change, but he can't yet be 100% sure.
For goods moving within the UK to consumers, for example, a consumer in Northern Ireland, we will want there to be as little paperwork as possible, hopefully none.
You're saying hopefully, but you don't know.
That's correct, because we have to go through a process during the implementation period with the EU to agree what these procedures are.
At its heart, the Brexit deal is about preventing a hard border with the Republic while allowing the UK to pursue an independent trade policy. That does come with economic risks for Northern Ireland. But the government's view is that those are risks worth taking. John Campbell, BBC Newsline.
With abortion no longer a crime since the law changed at midnight, women and children can terminate a pregnancy without fear of being prosecuted. The possibility of prosecution is also lifted from healthcare workers. Some GPs are warning that the healthcare system isn't ready for this momentous change. Here's our health correspondent, Mary-Louise Connolly.
At midnight, abortion became decriminalised in Northern Ireland. Thousands campaigned for change. The same passion came from those who wanted the law to stay the same. That law now means women and girls can terminate a pregnancy without fear of being prosecuted. The possibility of prosecution is also lifted from healthcare workers. In this interim period between now and April, those affected will continue to travel to England for medical terminations with their expenses covered. However, during this time, abortions in cases of fatal or serious fetal anomaly can be carried out in local hospitals and, in rare cases, up to 28 weeks.
So you will have her obstetrician, her fetal medicine consultant under the guidance of paediatricians and, most importantly, the family members working together to form the best outcome for the patient and her family.
In GP surgeries, medical services can't be provided, but information, including access to a central abortion booking system in England, must be available.
The public consultation which opens today, I think it's important for medical staff, healthcare staff to speak out about this. I think it's important to make clear that there is no legislation. There's a gap for 5 months. 5 months isn't enough to get a service started. It isn't enough to have a conversation about this. It's not enough time to ballot people. It's not enough time to gather the feelings of people in Northern Ireland.
The Northern Ireland office is about to consult on how the system will change after March, including locating medical abortion services on 2, perhaps 3 hospital sites. Some doctors will need specialist training, all of which will be funded by the Department of Health. And it's thought buffer zones will be installed around those hospital sites to protect users and staff from potential protesters. While some see the decision as a victory for women's rights, others read what happened entirely differently.
I think this is a time for prophetic voices to speak out and say, create a good future for our children. At present, we're not doing that, and many countries that have gone down the route ahead of us are coming back and saying, don't go there. It actually is the road to nowhere.
So contentious is this issue that opposing sides may never reach a middle ground. Mary-Louise Connolly, BBC Newsline.
Still to come on the programme. The Ballymurphy inquest is told this child and her brother narrowly avoided death under a hail of army bullets. Next, a court case involving a woman who lived with her partner's decomposing body for more than a week and then claimed his prescription medication. She has been jailed for a year. Angela Irwin admitted preventing the lawful burial of Robin McMaster. Our North East reporter Sarah Gervin was at Antrim Court.
The body of 40-year-old Robin McMaster was found by his brother in his Ballymena flat. It was severely decomposed. Relatives had been trying to reach him for days. They'd been told by his partner Angela Irwin that he was ill in bed. In fact, he was dead. Family members say the circumstances of his death have compounded their grief.
It has the family actually in bits. We think about him nearly every single day, and We think it's getting better, but it's not. It's just getting worse and worse and worse.
The court was told it's possible Mr McMaster had died up to 3 weeks before being found after an overdose of prescription medication. A plumber working at the flat had complained of the smell. A day before the body was found, Irwin ordered sleeping tablets and antihistamines in her partner's name, but used them herself. A defence barrister said she suffered from anxiety and depression and abused prescription drugs. She offered an unreserved apology to Robin McMaster's loved ones, but they still have unanswered questions.
I've been trying to, rack my brains as to why she did what she did, but clearly she must have issues, health issues, and I hope she gets the help that she deserves.
In court, the judge read a statement from Robin McMaster's mother. She said she kept my son lying there like a piece of rotting meat. I wasn't able to touch his hair or tell him goodbye. I am now serving a life sentence as a broken mother. Irwin was given a 2-year sentence, one to be served in prison and one on licence. Sarah Gervin, BBC Newsline at Antrim Crown Court.
A mother has told the Ballymurphy inquest that her small children narrowly avoided death under a hail of army bullets. She said it was a miracle neither of them had died. Her statement closed another phase of the inquest, as Will Leach reports.
On an August evening 48 years ago, these streets echoed to heavy gunfire. Tracers tore across the sky above the houses and flats. High-velocity bullets ripped through the bedroom of a 1-year-old girl, Anne-Marie Young, sleeping beside her 3-year-old brother George. You can see a bullet hole on the wall behind. Paratroopers fired dozens of rounds from at least 2 different locations. In a statement, their mother, Anne-Marie Young, recalled crawling across the bedroom floor with her husband George on their hands and knees, desperately dragging the cots from the room. She said the children had pieces of wood in their hair, splinters from the bullet holes in the cot. The walls of the room were pockmarked with bullets. It was a miracle, she said, that neither of her children was killed. Soldiers on high ground in Spring Martin said they fired at gunmen down in the Moyard flats below. Soldiers at the Henry Taggart Base complex stated they fired at gunmen in the Moyard flats from the opposite direction. Standing in Moyard today, you can see it's perfectly possible that both groups of soldiers inadvertently fired at each other, with the flat directly in between. Soldiers were warned by their commanders to cease firing. No gunmen or weapons were found in the flat, no bloodstains, just the fragments of spent bullets held by a father above the damage to his children's cots. This chilling statement came on the last day of scheduled evidence here at the Ballymurphy inquest. Some soldiers are still preparing statements, so there might just be more. But in over 100 days of evidence over 11 months, we've heard from soldiers, civilians and experts. And the coroner must still consider her findings. That will take time. Will Leach, BBC Newsline at Belfast Coroner's Court.
The chief executive of Quinn Industrial Holdings has told BBC Newsline that he believes criminals were paid to carry out the recent serious assault on the firm's director, Kevin Lunny. Liam McCaffrey thinks the motive was to force resignations among senior staff. And he suggests it may be time for a specialist cross-border police team to investigate this and other attacks on employees and property linked to the firm. Our investigations correspondent Kevin McGee reports from County Fermanagh.
This swathe of the Fermanagh-Cavan border is known locally as Quinn Country, where the company straddles both counties, employing some 800 people. Quinn director Kevin Lunny suffered severe injuries to his face, legs and torso after he was abducted last month.
Mr Lunny was driving home to Connolly when his car was rammed and set on fire. He was bundled into another vehicle and driven south of the border, where he was held captive in a horse box and tortured.
Kevin is recovering physically. His leg was broken in 2 places below his knee, but he's starting to walk again with the aid of crutches. His lacerations are beginning to heal, but obviously it's a huge event, a huge trauma in his life, and it's going to take it's going to take a period for Kevin to reach full recovery.
Speaking a month on from the abduction, the company's chief executive believes those responsible were paid to carry out the attacks to force resignations at the company.
I think they're purely criminals. Whether they have any paramilitary connections or not, that's purely incidental. They're doing this for money. I don't think anything I say to the paid criminals who carried this out would make any difference. To whoever's paying them, I would say this is a crazy system to be on, and it just defies any kind of logic that this would serve anybody's purpose.
The companies which make up Quinn Industrial Holdings were formerly owned by Sean Quinn, once Ireland's richest man. He's joined widespread community condemnation of the attacks.
Mr. Quinn declined to do a recorded interview, but he did speak to me on the telephone. He said he utterly condemns the attacks on the company and its staff and was disgusted by them. He said there is no possibility that the Quinn family could benefit in any way from this campaign of intimidation.
So far, no one has been charged in connection with the kidnapping and assault on Mr. Lunny.
These attacks have been going on for an 8-year period in different forms. So I think there is a case, if this particular investigation doesn't yield results, for a properly resourced cross-border team, specialist team, to get involved to bring this to an end, because it's gone on for far too long.
The assault on Mr. Lunny is the most serious in a long-running campaign of intimidation against staff at the company. Kevin McGee, BBC Newsline, Derry Lynn, County Fermanagh.
A 61-year-old man has been jailed for causing the death by dangerous driving of a cyclist and seriously injuring another. The road crash was near Bangor in July 2017. Our South East reporter Cormac Campbell was in the court.
40-year-old Gavin Moore died as a result of the crash on the Bangor to Newtonards dual carriageway. Today, Downpatrick Crown Court heard that his partner Joanne Ryans passed away just last week. In a victim impact statement, she had written that her world had been broken by his death. In the dock was Hing Tong Chung of Hanover Hill in Bangor. The court heard that he had been a respected pillar of the Chinese community here, and to that point hadn't received as much as a fixed penalty notice for his driving, but on that day he had driven into the group of cyclists. Last month he pleaded guilty to causing Mr. Moore's death and of causing serious injury to Gareth Boyle. The court heard Chung felt shame and upset as a result of the crash. He was given a 12-month sentence, half of which will be in prison and half on supervision. Cormac Campbell, BBC Newsline, Downpatrick.
Bail has been refused to John Downey, the 67-year-old accused of playing a part in the killing of 2 soldiers in Enniskillen in 1972. John Downey was extradited from County Donegal after handing himself into Gardaí earlier this month. Today, a court was told he had been matched with a fingerprint found on the remnants of a device used in the attack. Mark Sidebottom focuses on club football this evening. Mark.
Yeah, break from the rugby down to focus on the football. Good evening, everyone. A point tonight against St Patrick's Athletic would guarantee a European football for Derry City next season, and that in turn would come with a £200,000 qualification bonus. Here's our Northwest reporter, Kieran Turridge.
Derry City's 2-1 away win against Sligo Rovers at the weekend maintained their challenge for European qualification. With 2 league games to go, the Candy Stripes just need a point tonight against St Patrick's Athletic to ensure a potential windfall of around €250,000.
Running football clubs in Ireland is not a cheap pastime anymore. It's a professional business, and you need as much money as you can coming in. And all you have to do is look at Linfield's run in Europe this year to see how much money you can bring into the club. Dundalk have done it this last 5 or 6 years, and that's why they're the top team in the league.
Declan Devine wants to finish in 3rd place, so that means an all-out drive to beat St Pat's this evening and Finn Harps in the final game at home on Friday.
There's still a bit of work to be done over the next 2 games, but it would be fit and reward for everybody if we can get over the line and qualify for European competitions. But you know, it has to be only the start here. If that is achievable, that has to be only the start, and we'll not be doing any pats on the back. We want to continue to progress the club.
St Patrick's Athletic still have an outside chance of qualifying for Europe next season, so they'll come here tonight determined to win. It's all to play for. Kieran Turridge, BBC Newsline at the Ryan McBride Brandywell Stadium.
Kick-off 7:45, game live on BBC Radio Foyle. Meanwhile, in the Irish League, Linfield host Warrenpoint, and the win would move them to within 2 points of leaders Coleraine. Warrenpoint, of course, bottom of the table, and they know they're in for a tough evening at Windsor Park.
It's up to the players. This is part of the development. We're all playing football. They're getting the luxury of going out there and competing every week. I'd only love to do it myself. So that's the challenge of playing football. Every week gives you new opportunities. So look, it will be tough. Absolutely, going to Windsor Park is going to be a challenge, and it's really over to them to dust themselves down and move forward.
And that's it for this evening, Donna.
Okay, Mark. The weather forecast is next, and joining us in the studio is Jeff Maskell. How's it looking, Jeff?
Well, Donna, good evening to you. I'm afraid that our spell of beautiful, settled weather is due to break, and it's all down to this weather front moving in towards us this evening and sitting over us tonight. And once that's cleared out of the way, we're left with some very strong winds to deal with on Thursday. But before that, not a bad night to come. We've got plenty of cloud cover sitting over us. We've got a southwesterly breeze, and that's introducing some pretty mild air. So it means that overnight temperatures tonight probably no lower than 7 to 10 degrees. But the rain is threatening out in the west. And as we head into Wednesday itself, whilst we're going to start off on quite a cloudy start, it is going to turn increasingly breezy, and that rain is going to move east through the day. So this is the picture you'll be waking up to tomorrow morning. We've got clouds sitting over us, that southwesterly feed of relatively mild air. But you can see the extent of that weather front. It's going to deliver, I think, about 15 millimetres of rain through the day, but always introducing some relatively mild air. A much drier day across the water. I think London and the southeast could see top temperatures, maybe 14 or 15 degrees. But further north, those winds build the closer you get to the weather front. And I think across Northern Ireland through the afternoon, it could be a pretty wet and windy afternoon. The breeze always picking up in the heaviest of the downpours. Maybe up to 14 degrees, where we saw a little bit of early brightness through the day. But once that front finally clears out of the way, it's this area of low pressure that we've got to watch out for, and the winds that are sweeping around the bottom of it. And it means that on Thursday around the coast we could see gusts of around 60 miles an hour. So a pretty windy affair on Thursday, sending those showers working their way through. And it has an impact on the temperatures because we're drawing in that colder air from the northwest, so highs of 11 or 12 degrees. And as we head towards the weekend, that downward trend in our temperatures continues. By the time we get to Friday, it could be down to 8 degrees in the daytime, but things turning cooler but brighter as we head into next week. Donna.
OK, Jeff, that's it for now. Our late news is at 10:25. That's here on BBC One. Thank you for watching this evening. Bye-bye and take care.